Welcome to the NRL Punters Weekly Digest, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know leading into this week's NRL matches. This is our round 3 wrap-up, and the first game of round 3 was the Panthers versus the Storm in what was a complete classic of a match. It was everything that we expected it was going to be. The conclusion wasn't outright until the very last play of the game, where Justin Olam was denied a try on full time. The eventual score in this match was the Panthers 12, Storm 10, and it had everything that we wanted in a game of football. We saw Matt Burton finally get released into the wild of the NRL ground, I guess. He really stepped up in Nathan Cleary's absence. He kicked for 584 metres. He had a line break assist. He had 3 tackle breaks. And he really looked like he justified why the Panthers didn't want to get rid of him this season, why they didn't want to release him this season, I should say, to the Bulldogs a year early. They knew that at some point he was going to get the call up and they were going to need him, and he didn't disappoint. And I would be surprised if he doesn't find his way in that 17 every week now. That's how good he was. Mitch Kenny stepped up in the absence of Api Coruscant at hooker, and he was outstanding. He had 53 tackles, and that would have been very pleasing for Ivan Cleary, knowing that when you lose the class of someone like Api, you've got a young guy who can step in and do the job. So that was really, really pleasing for them. And yeah, we had that massive finish at the end. Justin Olam held up in the in goal. It was the try that would have won the game, but in the end, the 2-point margin was good enough to get Penrith over the line. My tip in that game was Penrith by 10. Our first Friday night game saw the Dragons take on the Sea Eagles, and I tipped the Dragons to win this one by 8. I thought it was going to be a lot closer than it was, but in the end, it was a 38-12 scoreline. The Dragons were very, very good, and they were very impressive. I think what was most impressive was the cohesiveness of that almost completely all Queensland spine, obviously minus Dufty at fullback. Those guys have played together before and they really showed it. The big shame, or the big, talking point in this game was the injury to Ben Hunt. He looks set to be out for, I think about 6 weeks with a fractured leg. Initially, he didn't think it was a fracture. He thought it was a cork, but then after the game, they ruled that it was a fractured leg, which is a real shame because this was one of his best games in the Red V. He looked really, really good at halfback. I think the fact that they're getting some really good service from dummy half too is helping. McCulloch is obviously a very classy, experienced hooker, and he's really, and obviously those guys have got a previous combination from their time at the Broncos together, but he's really getting their forwards going and obviously allowing the inside and the outside backs to do their thing. Zach Lomax equaled a club record of 22 points for the Red V in that game. And he's a guy that I think he's not far off that New South Wales Origin selection. I know New South Wales have got a plethora of outstanding young centres waiting in the wings, and also about 1 million fullbacks, so they're probably just going to slot in that back line anyway. But he's definitely worthy of being considered in that kind of company. Rabbitohs took on the Roosters in what we were expecting was going to be another classic. And it wasn't in the end. It wasn't. It was probably more disappointing for the Roosters, not just because they lost, but because they lost Kiri for the season with an ACL injury, which is an absolutely massive blow for their premiership chances. Many have already run the rule through them, saying there's no way the Roosters can win without Kiri. On the flip side, it does mean that we're going to get to see a bit of Sam Walker, the highly touted 18-year-old, I guess, second to Joseph Suaalii in terms of how much we've been talking about, or second in terms of the anticipation for his debut. But Sam Walker, I guess he is going to get the call up this week in the absence of Luke Keary. 26-16 scoreline, really flattered the Roosters. In the end, it was just a couple of consolation tries that they got that kind of made that look a little bit better than it was. Cameron Murray was back to his best. He was bending that line. He was making things happen. That's got to be really encouraging for the Rabbitohs. And yeah, not too much more to say about that game other than I tipped the Roosters by 4. I expected it to be close either way, and yeah, it wasn't. So I guess we'll monitor the Roosters situation, and it'll be interesting to see how their young halves combination this week of Drew Hutchinson and Sam Walker are able to go in the absence of some star power. The Raiders took on the Warriors in the first Saturday game of round 3, and this was a highly contentious game. There was a lot in this game. It was a huge battle of attrition for several reasons. One, it was just a really hard game, which we expected between these two sides. Big forwards, big powerful outside backs. But also because the Raiders effectively played with one interchange player for 67 minutes of the match, with one of their 13 on the field playing with a floating rib injury. Right centre Curtis Scott had effectively broken ribs for that whole game, and in that second half he became a bit of a turnstile because evidently it's really hard to defend tackle people when you've got a broken rib. I wouldn't know. I'm not that tough. The Raiders were actually up 25-6 at halftime in this clash, and that was despite their injury woes. They put in a really, really good performance. But in the end, the Warriors ran it down, and they were the eventual winners 34-31, partially thanks to a forward pass that led to a try, which was awarded to the Warriors, which would have been the difference between a win and a loss. But hey, on full time, the Raiders had the opportunity to win the match through Jordan Rapana, but RTS, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, great try saver. One of the all-time best try savers you'll ever see. Denied him on the death. And RTS was at his vintage best in this game. I had some conversations with some Warriors fans on some Facebook forums, and I say conversations, they weren't arguments. And I basically said, look, you can't be overly impressed with this victory. This is a par result. See, I have a lot of respect for the Warriors, and I think that they can be a final side this year based on what I've seen. They can't come out of that clash thinking that they're world beaters. That was a par result. If you're a good side, even if you're down by 19 points at halftime, if the other side has only got one interchange player, then you have to put them to the sword. You have to win that match. And not to mention the fact that one of their centers on an edge has got a broken rib, so you can exploit that all day long. That's a par result. Anyway, I won't say too much more about this clash. I had the Raiders by 8. They lost. Broncos played the Bulldogs from Suncorp Stadium in a game where I was asleep at halftime, literally, because I'd had a few beers during the Raiders-Warriors clash. And I fell asleep at halftime and I saw the 2-0 scoreline, and I was like, well, of course it's 2-0. Look who's playing. I didn't miss anything. And then in the second half, it all opened up. Broncos scored another 22 points. They won 24-0. Their outside backs were outstanding. They all ran. 4 of their 5 outside backs ran for 200 or more meters. 200 or more meters. That's ridiculous. But when the Bulldogs are missing 39 tackles and conceding 11 line breaks, you can kind of see how that... Oh no, that 11 line break stat is from another game. My apologies. But no, they conceded 39 missed tackles. Of course that's going to happen. I don't know where the Bulldogs go from here. They've got some really good personnel there. They don't look like they yet have the nucleus for a good team. They just have good players in like random positions. I think next year they'll be much better. They have to be. They'll have a full season with Trent Barrett, and they'll get Matt Burton next year, and hopefully they can make something of that. I don't know why Lachlan Lewis isn't getting a call up to the first grade side. I thought that he was okay last year. And maybe they need to shake things up. Who knows? The Eels took on the Sharks. this was another game with a million injuries. The Sharks ended the match with no interchange players. They had 3 players that went out for HIAs, and they all failed them. I believe it was Will Kennedy, Britton Nakora, Wade Graham. Have I got that right? Yeah, and then Sione Katoa succumbed to a medial ligament injury. So they were up against it, the poor buggers. And they ended up losing 28-4. After this game, in the post-game press conference, Sharks coach John Morris actually touted the idea of having an 18th man rule where a player fails an HIA, you can have a replacement. And the NRL actually seriously looking at this one, so I wouldn't be surprised if this one gets introduced at some point in time. Personally, I think it would be a great idea. Clint Gutherson, he ran for 284 metres. I love that guy. He's just... If you could have 17 Clint Guthersons in your team, you're winning a comp. The guy does everything, and he wears his heart on his sleeve. I had the Eels by 8 in this clash, if I hadn't already mentioned that. Knights v Tigers. This was a game that, if you saw my best bets video last week, ruined my multi. Ruined my multi. Bloody... Yeah. I shouldn't be getting angry at players for ruining my multi. I'm not. Anyway. Knights, Tigers. I had the Knights to win. Tigers won 20-24, and look, a lot of positives to come out of this game for the Tigers. I mean, their halves looked really good. Big fan of Adam Dewey. I didn't know if he was going to be able to make the step up to 5'8" from fullback, but he's looking like that guy's a footballer. He's got something there. He's really got something there. Luke Brooks was better. They both provided some good service for their players. Bit of a shame that Mitch Pearce couldn't get a win in his 300th NRL game in front of his home crowd at Chicken Nugget Stadium, McDonald Jones. But great player. Just couldn't get the goods on the day. I had the Knights by 18 in that clash. I was wrong. And then the last game of the round, I don't know what to say about this one. There aren't many positives for the Cowboys. They lost 8-44. Now, I expected a loss, but I thought it was going to be a close affair. I said the Titans by 6. They lost by 36. They lost by a margin. And at the end of the game, Josh Maguire was interviewed, and he was kind of like dumbstruck. Dumbstruck? Is that the word? Dumbfounded? Lost for words. He knows that something needs to change at the club, that they're soft, they're not doing what they need to be doing, but he honestly looked like a guy who just didn't have any answers. And I feel sorry for Todd Payton walking into this, excuse my language, shit show. And I kind of feel like maybe Paul Green got out just at the right time. I mean, Todd Payton, as good as a coach as we think he is, as respected as he is, especially for what he did for the Warriors during a COVID-affected season, I think there are some bigger problems at that club. I'm not sure what they are. The playing group, for the personnel that they have in that side, they are really not aiming up to expectations. I think maybe the game is a bit too quick for their forwards. I think maybe the game has passed some of those forwards by. Like, you're gone are the days of a Jordan McLean. I mean, you're just not going to be able to keep up with the ruck speed. Maybe they need to think of a restructure of their squad. I don't know, but let's talk about the Titans' positives to come out of that game. Tino Fa'asuamaleaui and David Fifita ran for 183 and 187 metres respectively. They absolutely terrorised the Titans. Tyrone Peachey gave them some really good options from dummy half there when he was playing kind of in the middle of the field. The Titans look like a team. They really do. The Cowboys, on the flip side, they missed 42 tackles and conceded 11 line breaks. There's my 11 line break stat. 11 line breaks. You're going to lose a lot of games conceding those sorts of numbers in defence. Not good enough. Anyway, that's it for our round 3 wrap for this 2021 NRL Telstra Premiership season. If you liked the video, give me a like. Please give me a like. I appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, also do that. I've got another 2 videos that come out each week. If you've been watching, if you noticed, I'm kind of mixing up the formula. I'm just trying to see what works and what you guys want to watch. This week I've got a Best Bets episode coming out, and obviously the obligatory, but it's important, round 4 team list episode. So I'll see you next time. Cheers.